The woman standing outside the general store in Genoa, Nevada wore her fear like a second skin, and Logan Pierce noticed it the moment he rode into town on that blazing afternoon in June of 1875. She flinched when a door slammed somewhere down the dusty street, her whole body tensing as if expecting a blow, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. He had seen that kind of fear before, in horses that had been broken wrong, and in people who had learned that the world was a dangerous place through bitter experience. The woman was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a dress that had seen better days. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small basket, her eyes darting nervously from face to face in the crowd. Logan dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. He was a tall man, lean from years of ranch work, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. At 28, he had learned patience from working with difficult horses, and he recognized that same skittish quality in the woman before him. She was standing frozen near a post, clearly wanting to move but unable to make herself take the first step into the busy street. He approached her carefully, stopping a good 10 feet away so as not to crowd her space. When her eyes flickered toward him, he saw panic flash across her features. "Madam," he said gently, his voice low and unhurried, "you look like you could use some help crossing the street." These Saturday crowds can be overwhelming. She flinched at his words, taking a half step backward. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the basket handle. "I'm Logan Pierce," he continued, staying exactly where he was. "I work at the Triple Bar Ranch about 5 miles north of town. I don't mean you any harm, just thought you might appreciate someone clearing a path through all these folks." The woman's throat worked as she swallowed hard. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can," Logan agreed easily. "But you don't have to. Not if you'd rather have some help." A wagon rattled past, and she jumped at the sound, pressing herself against the wall of the general store. Logan's jaw tightened. Whatever had happened to this woman, it had left deep scars. "Tell you what," he said, keeping his tone conversational and light. "I'm heading over to the livery stable myself. I'll just walk on ahead nice and slow, and if you want to follow along in my wake, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. No pressure either way." He touched the brim of his hat in a respectful gesture and then turned, moving at an unhurried pace toward the livery across the street. He didn't look back, didn't want to make her feel watched or pressured. But he listened, and after a moment, he heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind him, maintaining a careful distance. The crowd parted naturally for him, and he made sure to walk slowly enough that she could keep up without having to hurry. When they reached the other side of the street, he stopped near the livery entrance and turned slightly. The woman had stopped about 15 feet away, her chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. But she had made it across, and there was something in her eyes that might have been gratitude. "See, not so bad," Logan said quietly. "You heading to the boarding house?" She nodded once, a jerky movement. "That's just down this way. I'll walk in that direction, same as before. You can follow if you want." This time, when he started walking, she fell into step behind him more quickly. The boarding house was only 3 buildings down, and when they reached it, she hurried up the steps and disappeared inside without a word. Logan stood there for a moment, wondering about her story. Then he shook his head and went about his business, collecting the supplies he needed from the hardware store and checking on a saddle he had left for repair. It was the owner of the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson, who told him more when he stopped by later to deliver a chair he had mended for her. "That poor girl," Mrs. Henderson said, shaking her head as she led him into the parlor. Grace Thompson, her name is, came here 3 weeks ago, barely a penny to her name. Works for me now, helping with the cleaning and cooking in exchange for room and board." "What happened to her?" Logan asked, setting the chair down carefully. Mrs. Henderson lowered her voice, though they were alone in the room. "Her husband died 6 months back. From what I can piece together, he was not a kind man. She's terrified of her own shadow, flinches at every loud noise and sudden movement. Won't hardly talk to anyone, especially men." Logan felt anger kindle in his chest, the controlled kind that came from seeing injustice. "She's safe here." "As safe as I can make her," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "I don't allow any rough behavior in my establishment, and I've made it clear to my boarders that Grace is under my protection. But the poor thing needs to heal, and that's going to take time." Over the next few weeks, Logan found himself coming to town more often than strictly necessary. He told himself it was because the ranch needed supplies, or because he had business at the bank, but the truth was that he wanted to see Grace, to make sure she was all right. He was always careful to keep his distance. When he saw her sweeping the porch of the boarding house, he would tip his hat from across the street. When she was hanging laundry in the side yard, he would pass by on the opposite side of the road, offering only a quiet greeting if she happened to look his way. Slowly, incrementally, she began to relax around him. The flinching became less pronounced. Once, she even nodded in response to his greeting instead of just staring at the ground. It was a hot afternoon in July when things changed. Logan was loading supplies into his wagon when he heard a commotion near the saloon. A drunk cowboy had stumbled out into the street and was making a nuisance of himself, hollering and waving his arms. Logan saw Grace frozen on the boardwalk, trapped between the drunk man and a group of rowdy cowboys coming from the other direction. She was breathing fast, on the edge of panic, her eyes wide and darting. Logan moved without thinking, but he forced himself to slow down as he approached her. The last thing she needed was another man rushing at her. "Grace," he said softly, still several feet away. "It's Logan. You're all right. I'm going to stand right here between you and those fellows, and when you're ready, you can walk past me to safety. I won't touch you, and I won't let anyone else get near you. Take your time." She was trembling, pressed against the wall of the mercantile. Her breath came in short gasps. "That's it," Logan said, his voice low and steady. "Just breathe. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." The drunk cowboy lurched in their direction, and Logan shifted his position, blocking the man's path without making any aggressive moves. "Move along, friend. You're scaring the lady." "What lady?" the cowboy slurred, squinting. "The one who doesn't want anything to do with you," Logan said firmly. "Go on now, sleep it off." The cowboy muttered something and wandered off. Logan stayed where he was, his back to Grace, giving her space and protection all at once. "Whenever you're ready," he said over his shoulder. "The boarding house is clear in that direction. I'll make sure nobody bothers you." It took a full minute before she moved. He heard her footsteps, quick and light, as she hurried past him. He caught just a glimpse of her pale face before she disappeared around the corner. That evening, as the sun was setting and Logan was preparing to head back to the ranch, Mrs. Henderson came out onto the porch and beckoned to him. "Grace wanted me to thank you," the older woman said. "She's not ready to say it herself, but she wanted you to know she's grateful for what you did today." "No thanks needed," Logan said. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Mrs. Henderson pointed out. "You did. And you did it in a way that didn't make her feel more scared." "That shows real thoughtfulness, Mr. Pierce." Logan tipped his hat. "She's had a hard time of it. Doesn't take a genius to see that." "She asked about you," Mrs. Henderson said, a knowing look in her eyes. "Asked what kind of man you are, whether you're someone to be trusted." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're one of the good ones. that you've never given me or anyone else in this town reason to doubt your character." Logan felt warmth spread through his chest. "I hope that gives her some peace of mind." Over the following weeks, a tentative connection began to form. Grace started to acknowledge him more openly, offering small nods when he passed by. Once, when he was helping Mrs. Henderson repair a loose step on the porch, Grace brought them both glasses of cool water. Her hand shook when she offered his glass, but she met his eyes for a brief second before looking away. "Thank you, madam," Logan said gently. "That's very kind of you." She nodded and retreated back inside, but Logan counted it as progress. One day in late August, he encountered her in the general store. She was studying a bolt of fabric with a wistful expression, running her fingers lightly over the soft material. When she noticed him, she started to move away, but he spoke before she could leave. "That's pretty fabric," he said, keeping several feet of distance between them. "Would make a nice dress." "I cannot afford it," she said quietly, her voice still carrying that thread of fear but stronger than before. "Maybe one day," Logan said. "Things have a way of working out." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw questions in her eyes. Questions she wasn't ready to ask out loud. "I'll move slow," he said softly, understanding what she needed to hear. "I won't rush you or push you. Until you know you're safe, I'll just keep moving slow." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "Why?" she whispered. "Because everyone deserves to feel safe," Logan said simply. "And because I think you're worth the patience it takes." She left the store shortly after, but Logan noticed that she didn't flee quite as quickly as she used to. The turning point came in September. Logan was in town to deliver some horses he had trained to a buyer when he saw Grace sitting on a bench outside the boarding house, her face buried in her hands. Even from a distance, he could see she was crying. He approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "Grace, are you hurt?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face, and shook her head. "Mrs. Henderson's daughter is coming to visit," she said, her voice breaking. "She's bringing her children. Mrs. Henderson needs my room, and I have no money for anywhere else. I don't know what to do." Logan's mind worked quickly. "There's a small cabin on the ranch property," he said carefully. "It's been empty since old Jim retired last year. It's clean and sound, with a good stove and a well nearby. You could stay there, help the ranch cook with meal preparation. We'd pay you fair wages." Fear flashed across her face. "I cannot live on a ranch full of men." "It's not like that," Logan assured her. "The cabin is set apart from the bunkhouse by a good distance. Mrs. Winters is the cook, and she lives in the main house with her husband, who's the foreman. There are hands around, yes, but they're good men and they follow the rules. No drinking on the property, no rough language around women. Mr. and Mrs. Winters run a tight ship." Grace wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "I don't know." "Tell you what," Logan said. "Why don't you come out and see the place before you decide? Mrs. Winters can show you around, answer any questions you have. If you don't feel comfortable, no hard feelings. We'll figure something else out." She was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I'll look." The next day, Logan arrived with a wagon to collect her. He helped her up onto the seat, careful not to touch her more than necessary, and kept a steady stream of calm conversation going as they drove out to the ranch. The Triple Bar Ranch was a sprawling property with good grazing land and a clear stream running through it. The main house was a solid structure built of timber and stone, and the various outbuildings were well maintained. Mrs. Winters, a round, cheerful woman in her 50s, greeted Grace warmly. "Come in, dear, come in. Logan told me about your situation. Let me show you the cabin." The cabin was small but charming, with one main room that served as living area and bedroom and a smaller room for cooking. It had a real window with glass panes, a luxury that made Grace's eyes widen. "It's lovely," she said softly. "You'd have your privacy," Mrs. Winters assured her. "I could use help with the cooking and baking, especially now that we've got 12 hands to feed 3 times a day. The work's honest, and you'd earn enough to save up some money of your own." Grace walked through the cabin slowly, touching the clean surfaces, looking out the window at the mountains in the distance. Logan watched her from the doorway, giving her space to think. "The door has a good lock," he said quietly. "And I give you my word, Grace, nobody will bother you here. Not while I'm around." She turned to face him, studying his face for a long moment. "You've been nothing but kind to me," she said. "Why?" "Because kindness costs nothing," Logan said, "and because you deserve it." Grace took the job, moving into the cabin 3 days later with her few possessions. Logan helped her settle in, carrying in firewood and making sure the water pump was working properly. He maintained his careful distance, always announcing his presence before entering her space, always keeping his movements slow and predictable. Over the following weeks, Grace began to bloom like a flower that had been kept too long in shadow. The work was hard but honest, and Mrs. Winters was patient and kind. The ranch hands, under strict orders from the foreman, were respectful and kept their distance. And Logan, true to his word, moved slow. He would stop by the cabin in the mornings, ostensibly to check on repairs or deliver supplies, but really just to see her. They would talk for a few minutes, conversations that grew gradually longer and less stilted. She told him, bit by bit, about her life. About growing up in Missouri, about marrying young to escape a difficult home, only to find herself in something worse. About her husband's cruelty, his quick temper and heavy hands. About the relief and guilt she felt when he died, kicked by a horse he'd been abusing. "I know I should not speak ill of the dead," she said one evening as they sat on the porch of her cabin, a careful 3 feet between them. "But I cannot pretend to mourn him." "You don't have to," Logan said firmly. "A man who raises his hand to a woman isn't worthy of mourning." She looked at him with something like wonder. "You really believe that?" "I know it for truth," Logan said. "My mother raised me to understand that strength is for protecting, not for hurting. Any man who uses his size and power to frighten someone smaller is a coward, plain and simple." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "I thought all men were like him." "Not all," Logan said softly. "Not even most, though I know it doesn't feel that way to you. There are good men in this world, Grace. Men who understand that a woman is a partner, not property." She was quiet for a long time after that, but when she went inside for the night, she paused at the door. "Thank you, Logan. For everything." "You don't need to thank me." "I do," she insisted. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me hope." As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, the relationship between Logan and Grace deepened. They began taking walks together in the evenings, always within sight of the main house, always at a pace that let her set the boundaries. She told him about her dreams, the things she had wanted before life had taught her to stop wanting. She had always loved reading, she confessed, but her husband had considered it a waste of time. Logan started bringing her books from town, classics and novels that Mrs. Henderson recommended. Grace's face would light up when he presented them, a joy that made his heart ache. "You should have whatever makes you happy," he told her one October evening as she clutched a copy of Jane Eyre to her chest. "I never thought I could be happy again," she admitted. "But I am. Here with this life I'm building, it feels like a miracle." "You did that," Logan said. "You had the courage to leave, to start over, to try again. That's all you, Grace." She looked at him, and for the first time there was no fear in her eyes when they met his. "You helped. You helped more than you know." It was November when Grace let Logan hold her hand for the first time. They were walking by the stream, watching the water rush over the rocks, when she stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. His hand shot out instinctively to steady her, and instead of flinching away, she let her fingers curl around his. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, neither speaking. Logan could feel her trembling slightly, could sense the courage it took for her to allow this touch. "Is this all right?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "I think it is." They walked the rest of the way back to her cabin hand in hand, and when they reached her door, she didn't immediately let go. "Logan," she said, her voice uncertain, "I think I'm beginning to feel things I didn't think I could feel anymore." His heart hammered in his chest. "What kind of things?" "Safe things," she said. "Happy things. Things that feel like maybe, possibly, they could be the beginnings of love." Logan lifted his free hand slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently touched her cheek. "I've been falling in love with you since the day I first saw you standing outside that general store," he said. "But I need you to know that there's no rush. We move at your pace always. If you need more time, I'll wait. If you need space, I'll give it to you. Whatever you need, Grace, I'm here." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of fear. "What did I do to deserve someone like you?" "You survived," Logan said. "You kept going even when everything was dark. That takes a strength most people never have to find. You deserve every good thing this world has to offer." Grace leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "Will you kiss me? Slowly, so I can stop you if I need to." "Yes," Logan breathed. He moved with infinite care, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. His hand cupped her face gently as he leaned in, stopping when his lips were inches from hers. She closed the final distance, pressing her mouth to his in a kiss that was sweet and tentative and full of hope. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. "I want to try," she said. "I want to try to love you the way you deserve to be loved." "You already do," Logan assured her, "just by being yourself, just by trusting me enough to let me in." The winter months brought a deepening intimacy between them. Logan courted Grace with old-fashioned patience, bringing her small gifts, taking her on rides through the snow-covered landscape, reading to her by the fire in her cabin on cold evenings. He learned her boundaries through careful attention and communication. Some days she welcomed his touch, letting him hold her close. Other days, ghosts of the past would rise up, and she needed space. He learned to read her moods, to know when to step forward and when to step back. Grace, for her part, marveled at the consistency of his gentleness. There were no sudden rages, no unpredictable mood swings. Logan was steady as the mountains, patient as the turning seasons. Slowly, the fear that had been her constant companion began to recede. On a cold December evening, as they sat together in her cabin with snow falling softly outside, Grace told Logan the rest of her story. About the worst of the abuse, about the times she had feared for her life, about the scars she still carried, some visible and some not. Logan listened without interrupting, his hand holding hers, his eyes full of a controlled fury that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with the man who had hurt her. "I wish I could take it all away," he said when she finished. "Every moment of pain, every second of fear." "You already have," Grace said softly. "Not by erasing the past, but by showing me a different future. By teaching me that love doesn't have to hurt, that a man's hands can be gentle, that I can be cherished instead of controlled." "You are cherished," Logan said fiercely. "You are precious to me, Grace, the most precious thing in my world." She kissed him then with more passion than before, and for the first time she initiated more than just a simple touch. Her hands moved to his shoulders, his chest, exploring carefully. Logan remained still, letting her set the pace until she pulled back slightly. "I want to be close to you," she whispered, "but I'm afraid I won't be able to go through with it when the time comes. I'm afraid the memories will come back." "Then we'll stop," Logan said simply. "Grace, there's no timeline here. We have the rest of our lives if you want them. I'm not going anywhere." "The rest of our lives," she repeated, testing the words. "Is that what you want, a life with me?" "More than I've ever wanted anything," Logan confirmed. "I want to marry you, Grace Thompson. I want to build a home with you, grow old with you, wake up next to you every morning for as many mornings as we're given. But only if that's what you want too. Only if you're ready." Grace was quiet for a long moment, her hand pressed over her heart. "I want that," she said finally. "I want all of it. And I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions for me. I'm ready to choose love instead." They were married in February of 1876, in a small ceremony at the church in Genoa. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Winters stood up with Grace, while the ranch foreman stood with Logan. It was a simple affair, but Grace glowed with happiness, wearing a new dress made from the fabric she had admired in the general store all those months ago. Logan had bought it for her as a wedding gift. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed her gently, mindful of her comfort even in this moment of joy. The small gathering of friends applauded, and Grace laughed, a sound Logan had learned to treasure for its rarity. They moved into a larger cabin on the ranch property, one that Logan had been fixing up for weeks. He had built new furniture, installed extra windows for light, and made sure everything was perfect for his bride. Their wedding night was tender and slow, with Logan taking infinite care to make sure Grace felt safe and loved. There were moments when she tensed, when the past threatened to intrude, but Logan was patient, stopping when she needed to stop, holding her when she needed comfort, letting her lead when she was ready to continue. Afterward, she cried in his arms, but they were healing tears. "I never knew it could be like this," she whispered. "I never knew it could be beautiful instead of terrible." "This is how it should be," Logan said, stroking her hair. "This is how it will be every time. I promise you that, Grace. I will never hurt you." "I know," she said, and the certainty in her voice told him how far she had come. "I finally know that in my bones. You're a good man, Logan Pierce, and I'm the luckiest woman alive." The early months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and deepening trust. Grace threw herself into making their cabin a home, sewing curtains and planting herbs in window boxes. She continued to help Mrs. Winters with the cooking, enjoying the work and the independence it gave her. Logan watched her transform from a frightened, broken woman into someone confident and joyful. She laughed more easily now, smiled freely, moved through the world without constantly looking over her shoulder. There were still hard days, moments when something would trigger a memory and she would retreat into herself. But Logan had learned to recognize the signs, to give her the space she needed while making sure she knew he was there when she was ready to reach out again. In the spring, Grace discovered she was pregnant. She told Logan one evening as they sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. "I'm scared," she admitted, her hand on her still flat stomach. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if I can't protect our child?" "You'll be wonderful," Logan assured her, pulling her close. "You're the strongest person I know, Grace, and you won't be doing this alone. We'll figure it out together just like we do everything else." "What if the baby is a boy, and he grows up to be like my husband was?" The fear in her voice was real and raw. Logan turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Our son will grow up seeing how a man should treat a woman. He'll see me treating you with respect and love." He'll learn that strength is for protecting, that gentleness is not weakness. And if we have a daughter, she'll grow up knowing her worth, seeing that she deserves to be cherished. Either way, our child will know love. That's what breaks the cycle, Grace. Love and awareness and choosing to be better. She leaned against him, reassured by his conviction. I believe you. The pregnancy was not easy. Grace struggled with sickness and exhaustion, and there were times when the physical changes to her body brought back difficult memories. But Logan was there through it all, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her feet when they ached, reading to her when she couldn't sleep. Mrs. Winters became a source of support and wisdom, sharing her own experiences and helping Grace prepare for motherhood. The older woman had become like a mother to Grace, filling a void that had existed for years. In December of 1876, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Logan feared he might lose her. But Grace was fierce in her determination, and when the baby's first cries filled the cabin, she wept with joy and relief. He's perfect, she whispered, holding the tiny bundle against her chest. Logan, look at him. He's perfect. Logan looked down at his son, at the small face and tiny fingers, and felt his world shift. He is, he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. What should we call him? They named him Samuel James, after Logan's grandfather and Grace's beloved younger brother who had died in childhood. Little Samuel had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and from the beginning, he was loved beyond measure. Parenthood brought new challenges and new joys. Grace discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed, fiercely protective of her son, while also learning to be gentle with herself when the demands of caring for an infant overwhelmed her. Logan was a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk with Samuel when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, and marveling at every small milestone. He made sure to continue courting Grace even amid the exhaustion of new parenthood, stealing moments for kisses and quiet conversations, making sure she knew she was still cherished. I used to think I could never be happy, Grace told him one night as they watched Samuel sleep in his cradle. I used to think my life would always be defined by fear and pain. But you showed me something different. You showed me that healing is possible, that love can be gentle, that I could have this. She gestured at the cabin around them, at the baby sleeping peacefully, at the life they had built together. You did the hard work, Logan reminded her. You chose to trust again, to hope again, to love again. That took more courage than I can imagine. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the Pierce family flourished. The ranch prospered under Logan's skilled management, and he was made a partner in the operation, giving them financial security Grace had never known before. In 1879, Grace gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Caroline Ruth. Caroline was a sunny, cheerful baby, easier than Samuel had been, and Grace found herself settling into motherhood with more confidence. She also began to find her voice in other ways. When she learned that a woman in town was being mistreated by her husband, Grace went to visit her, sharing her own story and offering support. She couldn't save everyone, but she could be a light for others walking the path she had once traveled. Logan supported this work wholeheartedly, even when it meant Grace brought home women who needed temporary shelter. Their cabin, and later the larger house they built, became a haven for those escaping abuse. You're taking your pain and turning it into purpose, Logan told her proudly. You're saving lives, Grace. I'm just doing what you did for me, she said, offering a safe place and the promise that things can get better. The years passed with the sweet steadiness of a good life well lived. Samuel grew into a kind, thoughtful boy who was gentle with animals and protective of his younger sister. Caroline was bright and bold, fearless in a way that made Grace's heart ache with gratitude that her daughter would never know the fear that had once defined her own life. In 1882, Grace gave birth to twin boys, Thomas and Daniel. The pregnancy had been a surprise, and the realization that she was carrying twins had been overwhelming. But Logan had been there through every moment, and the whole family had adjusted to the chaos and joy of having 4 children. The house Logan had built was spacious and warm, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a wraparound porch where they spent summer evenings. It was filled with laughter and love, with the sound of children playing and the quiet conversations of a couple who had chosen each other every day for years. Grace looked back on the frightened woman she had been and could hardly recognize her. That woman had believed she was broken beyond repair, that happiness was not for people like her. But she had been wrong. With patience and kindness and love, she had healed. Not completely, there were still scars, still moments when the past reached out to remind her of what she had survived, but she had built a life that was full and rich and joyful. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1886, Logan gave Grace a leather-bound journal. "For your thoughts," he said. "For the story you're still writing." That night, after the children were asleep, Grace sat at the kitchen table and wrote on the first page, "This is a love story, but not the kind I once imagined. This is the story of a frightened woman who learned to trust, and a gentle man who proved himself worthy of that trust. This is the story of healing and hope, of patience and persistence, of choosing love even when love seems impossible. This is our story, and it is beautiful." Logan read the words over her shoulder and kissed the top of her head. "It is beautiful," he agreed. "Just like you." The children grew and the years flowed on. Samuel became a skilled horseman like his father, with the same patient gentleness that made him gifted at training difficult animals. Caroline developed a passion for teaching and began working with the younger children in Genoa, showing the same fierce protectiveness her mother had for those who were vulnerable. The twins were inseparable, adventurous and full of mischief, but fundamentally kind-hearted. In 1890, when Grace was 40, she and Logan welcomed their 5th and final child, a daughter they named Hope. The name was deliberate, a reminder of everything they had built together. As the new decade dawned, Logan and Grace would sit together on their porch in the evenings, watching their children play and counting their blessings. The Triple Bar Ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the region, but more important than the financial success was the legacy they were building. "You remember the day we met?" Grace asked one summer evening, her hand in Logan's. "I was so afraid. Of everything, but especially of you." "I remember," Logan said. "I remember thinking that you looked like you needed someone to be gentle, to be patient." "You were both those things," Grace said. "You still are. You gave me time to heal, space to find myself again. You never pushed, never demanded. You just loved me steadily and surely until I could love you back." "Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did," Logan said. "Waiting for you to trust me was hard, but it was worth every moment. You were worth every moment." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I want our children to know our story," she said. "Not the ugly parts necessarily, though they should understand that evil exists in the world. But I want them to know that healing is possible, that love can be gentle, that patience and respect are the foundations of real love." "They'll know," Logan assured her. "They see it every day in how we treat each other and how we treat them. They're learning what love looks like by watching us." As the children grew into adults, they each carried forward the lessons they had learned in the Pierce household. Samuel married a sweet-natured woman named Mary and settled on a neighboring ranch, raising horses and children with the same patient kindness his father had modeled. Caroline married a schoolteacher and opened a school for girls in Carson City, focusing on education and empowerment. The twins went into business together, running a successful freight company that treated its workers fairly and honestly. And little Hope, growing up in a house full of love and laughter, developed a fierce sense of justice and a compassionate heart. Grace and Logan became grandparents many times over, their house a gathering place for family celebrations and Sunday dinners. The table Logan had built stretched the length of the dining room, and it was rarely empty. In 1898, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when they first met, Grace and Logan took a walk along the creek that ran through their property. They were in their 50s now, their hair graying, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. "You have any regrets?" Logan asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Grace thought about the question seriously. "I regret the years I lost to fear," she said finally. "But I don't regret the journey that brought me here. Every hard thing I survived made me who I am. And who I am is a woman who loves deeply, who has raised beautiful children, who has helped others find their way out of darkness. I regret the pain, but I can't regret the result." "You're an amazing woman, Grace Pierce," Logan said. "You always have been." "I'm an amazing woman because you saw that in me when I couldn't see it in myself," Grace said. "You looked at a frightened, broken woman and saw someone worth saving. You moved slow, gave me time, showed me that safety and love were possible. You changed my life, Logan. You gave me a life." "We gave each other a life," Logan corrected gently. "You taught me about courage, about resilience, about the strength it takes to trust again after trust has been shattered. You made me a better man." They stood together by the water, hands clasped, looking back on more than 2 decades of marriage. It hadn't always been easy. There had been struggles and setbacks, moments of doubt and fear, but they had faced everything together. "I would do it all again," Grace said. "Every moment, every challenge, because it all led here to this life with you." "So would I," Logan agreed, pulling her close. "I love you, Grace. I always have and I always will." "I love you too," she said. "More than I ever thought possible. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt, that it can heal instead. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Logan and Grace walked back to their home hand in hand. The house was lit from within, warm and welcoming, and they could hear the sounds of their family gathering for dinner. Children and grandchildren, laughter and conversation, the beautiful noise of a family built on love and respect. Grace paused at the door, looking back at the land they had worked, the life they had built. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being patient, for being kind, for being you." "Thank you for trusting me," Logan said, "for choosing to love again even when it scared you, for building this beautiful life with me." They went inside together, into the warmth and light and love that filled their home. The frightened woman who had flinched at shadows was gone, replaced by someone confident and joyful and whole. And the gentle cowboy who had promised to move slow had kept his word, building a love that was steady and sure and strong enough to last a lifetime. Their story became a legend of sorts in the area, shared as an example of healing and hope. Young women who found themselves in difficult situations would hear about Grace Pierce, about how she had escaped and started over, about how she had found love that was gentle instead of cruel. And young men would hear about Logan Pierce, about the patience and respect he had shown, about what real strength looked like. The Pierce family continued to thrive through the turn of the century and beyond. Each generation carried forward the values that Logan and Grace had established, understanding that love was a choice made daily. that patience was a virtue, and that healing was always possible. As they grew old together, Logan and Grace never lost the tenderness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. Logan still moved with careful deliberation around her, still made sure she felt safe and cherished. Grace still marveled at his gentleness, still felt grateful for the day a kind cowboy had noticed a frightened woman and decided to help on their 40th wedding anniversary. Surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, Grace stood to make a toast. Her hand was steady as she raised her glass, her voice clear and strong. 40 years ago, I was a woman who had lost hope, she said. I believed that safety was an illusion and that love always came with pain. But then I met a man who showed me something different. He showed me that real strength is gentle, that real love is patient, that healing is possible when you have someone who believes in you. She looked at Logan, her eyes bright with tears. You saved my life, not by rescuing me from my circumstances, but by giving me the time and space to save myself. You walked beside me through the hard work of healing. You celebrated every small victory and supported me through every setback. You loved me when I couldn't love myself, and you waited until I was ready to love you back. Logan stood and took her hand, his own eyes damp. You gave me the privilege of loving you, he said. You let me prove that not all men are cruel, that some of us understand what a gift it is to be trusted with a woman's heart. You made me a husband, a father, a grandfather. You made me complete. The family gathered raised their glasses, toasting a love that had endured for 4 decades, a love built on patience and respect and unwavering commitment. It was a love that had produced children and grandchildren, that had created a legacy of kindness and compassion, that had changed the lives of everyone it touched. As the celebration continued around them, Logan and Grace slipped out onto the porch, seeking a quiet moment together. The stars were bright overhead, the air cool and clean. "Do you remember what I told you that day in the general store?" Logan asked. "That I'd move slow until you knew you were safe." "I remember," Grace said, leaning against him. "It was the first promise you made me, and you've kept it every day since." "You're safe now," Logan said softly. "You've been safe for a long time, but I hope you know I'll never stop moving with care around your heart. I'll never take your trust for granted." "I know," Grace said. "That's why I love you so much. You understand that healing isn't a destination, it's a journey. You've been my companion on that journey every step of the way." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful out of broken pieces. The frightened woman and the gentle cowboy, now old and gray but still deeply in love. Inside, their family laughed and celebrated, carrying forward the legacy of love and respect that Logan and Grace had established. Outside, under the vast western sky, two hearts beat in sync, bound together by a love that had been worth waiting for, a love that had been built slowly and carefully, a love that would endure until the very end. And when that end came, many years later they went together, passing in their sleep within hours of each other, their hands clasped even in death. The family they left behind mourned deeply, but also celebrated, knowing that Logan and Grace had lived a full and beautiful life, that they had loved well and been well loved in return. The story of the frightened woman and the gentle cowboy became a family treasure, passed down through generations. It was told to children as a lesson about kindness and patience, about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. It was shared at weddings as an example of what marriage should be, and whispered to those who had lost hope as proof that better things were possible. The cabin where Grace had first found safety was preserved and maintained by the family, a reminder of where the journey had begun. The larger house where they had raised their children became a gathering place for reunions and celebrations, its walls holding the echoes of decades of laughter and love. And in Genoa, Nevada, where a frightened woman had once stood frozen outside a general store, unable to cross a busy street without help, a small plaque was placed. It read simply, "In memory of Grace and Logan Pierce, who showed us that love is patient, love is kind, and love can heal all wounds." Their love story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was a story of small kindnesses repeated daily, of patience practiced over years, of trust built slowly and carefully. It was a story of a woman who found the courage to hope again, and a man who proved himself worthy of that hope. It was a story of healing and growth, of choosing love even when love seemed impossible. But most of all, it was a story with a happy ending, proof that even those who have been broken can be made whole again, that even those who have lost hope can find it again, and that true love, the kind that moves slow and builds steadily, can last forever. The legacy of Logan and Grace Pierce lived on in their descendants, in the values they had instilled, in the example they had set. They had taken fear and transformed it into courage, taken pain and transformed it into compassion, taken brokenness and transformed it into beauty. They had built a love that was gentle and patient and true, a love that had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, the frightened woman who had learned to trust and the gentle cowboy who had taught her were together still. Their love story complete, their journey ended, their legacy secure. They had loved well, lived fully, and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask for?